Another question I have for you, which, and I'll let you guys ask. Obviously, following the will of God is the best way for us to ward off the Satan and the evil one. Take the example of someone like St. John Vianney, who is obviously following the will of God and doing what God asked of him, but he was still harassed, if you will, by the devil. How does that happen, or how does that?
That would be an example of demonic oppression. So just because somebody is attacked by evil doesn't mean that you're a bad person.
Right.
So possession could be one thing. You can think of St. Paul. St. Paul talks about the thorn in his flesh that he dealt with throughout his life. There are many people who believe that it was a form of demonic oppression that he also had in his life. So many of the great saints experienced oppression in their lives. You can think of St. Padre Pio. There's a great example of that. So just because one is being oppressed by evil doesn't mean that you're a bad person.
Right.
The devil is just upping his attacks against you because, look at Padre Pio for example. If you could get Padre Pio to doubt his faith, to succumb to the power of evil, so many people, literally tens of thousands, would have been impacted by that and may have had their own crisis of faith. So, or St. John Vianney. So it's a call to stand strong.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that because somebody had asked me that question earlier, so that's why I asked you. Hands up, anybody who has questions they'd like to ask Father. Here we go.
If somebody suffers from mental illness and has had limited success with treatment, how do you determine if it could be a possession or mental illness?
If somebody in that case is under the care of mental health professionals, and then I would talk with that mental health professional and then perhaps begin praying with them. Not necessarily exorcism prayers, but to begin by just praying with them. And then it may be that something might reveal itself, that maybe there is some evil that's present. So one could always begin by doing supplicating prayers. So, the rite of exorcism, a good way to look at it, it's like a nuclear bomb. It's in our arsenal, but it doesn't mean that we use it all the time. The best place to always begin is by using deliverance prayers, supplicating prayers. And then if they seem to have an impact on the life of the person, that might be an indication that that's an avenue to go down just a little bit more.
I saw a hand right over here.
I just wanted to ask a question about the infestation that you mentioned. Like my friends and I, we actually went to a house where there were like 6 kids and the parents were murdered. And so I was just wondering, like, what is the church's view of places like that where families have died and their places are haunted? Do they believe that there are actually demons there, and is going to these places kind of inviting those demons to maybe attack you?
Yeah, so going to those places, one could open themselves up to some types of attacks. The church doesn't have any clear teaching on the subject of if there is an entity in a home, is it a demon or is it a restless spirit? Because we believe that when we die, there's a particular judgment that takes place right away. So if a spirit is still present in a location, the only way that that's possible is if God is allowing that to happen for some reason. There are many people in the world of exorcism that will tell you that in many of those cases they believe that it's demons that are mimicking the people who used to live there. That's why, this notion of paranormal investigators or people that go in with all this equipment and they try to determine what's there, the church would frown on those practices because, once again, we could be opening ourselves up to something evil. Just once again, evil can be invited in directly or indirectly, and that might be an example of indirect. I have been in places where I've gone and prayed. There's been something there, and if it's unclear, I have a prayer that I use for a home troubled by an evil spirit or a restless spirit. So if it's unknown what kind it is, we offer the prayer and we ask God to bring this situation to an end. Because God knows everything.
My question is, are there any examples of exorcism in the Old Testament, or is it just into the New Testament with Jesus?
Yeah, exorcisms were practiced before the time of Christ, but they only became definitive with Jesus Christ. So exorcisms were practiced. Exorcisms are also a practice of non-Christian religions. So my associate pastor is from India. He arrived in March, and he was telling me that in the world of Hinduism, they practice a lot the notion of exorcism. So they were present, but they became definitive with the person of Jesus Christ. So demons are always cast out in the name of Christ. Another good point, when I was in Rome back in April, one of the things that was discussed is, why is it that if a demon is present, why isn't it just gone after one prayer? Why does it still remain? And there was an exorcist from Bologna who, his take on it was, exorcisms in the pagan world. Pagan world would be people who have never heard the good news of Jesus Christ. When those exorcisms are performed, they're immediate. The demons are gone. But in the apostate world, people who knew Christ and then rejected him or became indifferent to their faith, it seems that it takes a while, because once again, faith is an essential ingredient to cast out evil spirits. If you remember when Jesus returned to Nazareth, the scriptures say that he wasn't able to do much in his hometown, so much did their lack of faith distress him. So faith is a key ingredient. When I do an exorcism, I can invite other people to come. You know, the number of people there should be limited, but I have invited other people to come. But the people that are there have to spend their time in prayer. They also have to have deep faith. So one is not there to be a spectator, you know, to look at the antics of the demons or the evil spirits, but they're there to really pray and to focus on their faith and the power of God.
Father, you mentioned the Leviathan demon that it was in the Old Testament. Is that, I mean, is a demon, can they be in multiple places at once? Like, is there multiple,
Yeah, because they're not,
lust? Is there more than one lust demon? Or is it one?
They're not bound by time and space like we are. We could start making our heads spin, you know, when you think about that. Timeless time and spaceless space, but yeah, demons are not controlled by that. So even when a demon is cast out, it's always commanded to go to Christ to deal with as he wishes. Because if that connection is broken in the person's life and the demon is departed, you can't even ask the question, where does it go? Because that denotes space. And pure spirits don't exist in space. So that whole spiritual world, even Pope Paul VI said, we know very little about. We know that it's there. We know that it exists. So when demons are cast out, they're commanded to go to Christ to deal with as he will.
My question, Father, is you said that there are specific demons like Leviathan that are mentioned in the Bible. For some of those more powerful or already named demons, are there specific prayers for those, or are all demons essentially handled the same?
They're all handled the same. So the prayers in the church are the same. It may be that they just have to be prayed over and over again.
If you're giving an exorcism and it's a situation where you can't end it within the first session, how do you go about stopping? I mean, if they're having convulsions and stuff, do you just kind of, how do you calm them down, I guess?
Kind of let that play out. So if somebody's manifesting evil, when I do an exorcism, for the most part, it's about 30 minutes that I'll spend the time in prayer. Maybe just a little bit longer, but I always use that same time frame. But as I'm praying for the manifestations, I use those proper exorcism prayers more. And then once the manifestations will lie down. Because when I do those proper prayers and I'm getting a strong response from the demon, I'll insert other prayers like the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and always within there at some point the person will start praying with me. And when they start praying with me, then I know that the manifestations have subsided. And at that point I can even talk to the person and know, okay, how do you feel? What's going on? So a conversation with that person can help me to know what's effective and what isn't. Because as I mentioned earlier, people that I've spoken to say that they're aware of everything that's going on. They're just powerless to do anything about it. So I'll ask them what seemed to work. Or
I thought you were going to say is you tell them it's time for Dairy Queen.
Father, I wondered if you might address the issue, of spiritual warfare. Say a person is giving up a sinful lifestyle. They begin to experience discouragement, depression, whatever. Can you give us some steps as to how to fight that and how to recognize the presence of the evil one?
I thought you were going to reference out of Luke 11:26. So once the spirit's been cast out, it says, then the spirit finds 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they all enter the person and live there, and so that person is worse off than before. So spiritual warfare is somebody who's going to make some drastic changes in their life, maybe stop some of their sinful practices. It's not just enough to stop those practices. People have to replace that with something else. So something good and holy and virtuous, such as, praying, or you look at the Catholic, we have so many wonderful practices. People can do a holy hour, reconciliation, spiritual direction, whatever it might be. People need to fill that void in. Otherwise, just stopping a practice could set themselves up for even a life that's even worse in the future. Comment some more so I know exactly what you're looking for, or...
I think that's basically it, just to help people recognize the temptations, the discouragement, the weapons that the evil one uses when you're trying to grow closer to God. And a lot of times we don't recognize that. So we fall into discouragement.
And that's why it's important when you think about like a relationship with Christ. It has to be, as I said, intimate, personal, and communal. How often do you hear people today say, well, I'm a person of faith, but I don't need to go to church. Or I pray to God on my own, I don't need to go to church. So people are saying they have a personal relationship, but where's the communal? Communal is so important. Well, I talked earlier about how broken relationships can invite evil in. There's the example again, the Gerasene demoniac. After they're cast out, go home to your family. So being restored to rightful relationships with other people can be very powerful. Oftentimes people are trying to break perhaps a pattern of sin. Maybe they're estranged from their family. Can't tell you how many people I've talked to that would say, well, I had a lady, in fact, she died about a month ago. And I had been meeting with her for a couple of years. She had been away from the church for 40 years. But her son had not spoken to her for 40 years. He finally received word that she was dying, and he was trying to get to Indiana from Virginia. She died before he arrived. 40 years they didn't speak. Why do people carry those burdens with them? That I don't understand. So that's those types of situations. And this woman had such a heavy heart because she wanted to speak to her son, but when she went through a divorce, the son blamed her, and so he never spoke to her for the next 40 years.
I guess my question...
When sister speaks, people listen.
It's not too long ago, so a lot of them are interested in coming. And so a lot of things that come up are, there's a lot of talk about mediums or things like that. Is it okay, say, a dead person appears to you, do you talk to them, do you not talk to them? And the likelihood of it happening obviously is not huge. But they're like, is it a sin to talk to them? Is it a sin to do anything? And then the other thing that comes up a lot is, okay, so we played with a Ouija board. We're not really doing anything. We're having fun. It's just funny. Or Bloody Mary, you turn around in the mirror. I've done it so many times, it never happens. Like, you just kind of address that kind of behavior, among kids.
So, mediums. Mediums in and of themselves cannot violate the laws of nature. So, a non-material world does exist with non-material beings. So, church would say, mediums don't have any powers or abilities. They may think they do. but that would violate the laws of nature, so they do not have any special powers. If they have any abilities, then these powers are coming from evil spirits. So the church would say that mediums are agents of evil. Either they know that, and they're allowing themselves to be used by evil, or perhaps they've allowed themselves to be duped by evil and to think that they have the power of the ability. But the church would say, once again, mediums cannot in and of themselves violate the laws of nature. The danger with all that is, somebody might, like with a Ouija board, or you go to see a psychic, you go out of curiosity. So you're playing with the Ouija board, you say something, and something starts to move around or whatever. And then the next time you have a question, where might you go? So curiosity. Wow, how did that board know that? Or how did that person know that? They knew exactly. So curiosity, and then the next time, curiosity might lead to reliance. Well, I could pray about that, but the media gave a more definitive answer, so I think I'll go see that person. So curiosity leads to a relationship, or a reliance. Reliance leads to a relationship with evil, and either that relationship is going to be harmonious or it's going to be confrontational. So oftentimes people do things that seem to be harmless, but they may be opening themselves up to evil. If something appears to you, my recommendation is never to speak to it. So if somehow something pops up and, that's what evil would want. Evil wants to create a connection with you if you're conversing with it. That's why the church says that only a priest appointed by his bishop should speak to demons, because you have to know what it is that you're doing. Because if you think it's just all fun and game, you've created a connection with evil. And just because you want it to end, like, okay, go home now, doesn't mean that's going to be the case. So my response always is, if you're somewhere you think some entity has popped up or trying to converse with you, pray. But I certainly would not. I can't tell you how many times people will say, well, Father, I've been speaking to it, and I've been telling it to go away. I had one lady tell me one time, she was like, well, if you're going to be here, then just leave me alone. You can be here with us in the house too, but, just kind of do your thing and we'll do our thing. There was an exorcist out in New York who told me, I might share this story. It had to do with a convent. He said that these group of nuns came to him and said, we need your help. And he said, well, what do you need? And he goes, the sister said, we're closing our convent, and there's an entity in the convent that's become our friend, and we don't want to leave it behind. So could you come and do something? And he goes, well, how long has this been going on? And they said, 100 years. So within the convent, there had been some spirit or whatever that was in there. So he told them that he wanted them to, for a month, celebrate a mass once a week for this entity. And at some point they came to believe that it was the spirit of a deceased sister that had died 100 years ago. If the spirit's there, once again, we don't know, but prayers never heard. First time they were celebrating mass in the chapel, this is what the priest was telling me, all the lights go out during the Our Father prayer. The candles at the altar blow out. They're in complete darkness when they said, deliver us from evil. Everything's completely dark in the church. Second week, same thing happens again. Third week, happens again. Fourth week, they're celebrating Mass. Deliver us from evil. Lights go out, candles go out. Later on, all the lights come back on. The candles relit by themselves. Mass goes on. And the sister said whatever's there was gone. So they believed that it was the spirit of this particular sister, but she needed their prayers in order to find peace in the next life. And once they finally prayed for her, then everything ended.
What happens when you die, if you die while you're possessed?
What happens if you die when you're possessed? Once again, it's only with the body, not the spirit or the soul. So then that union would end. The question would be, was that connection with evil something harmonious? I mean, the person welcomed that evil in and somehow would that have an impact on their afterlife?
Is it possible there's a connection between the demonic and the world's just rampant desire for abortion to be legalized?
There's many examples. Right, once again, that lady I told you about in Rome, that young lady. The thing I may not have mentioned was that her mother attempted to abort her and the abortion failed. And then that's where then she blamed. But there's many evils in society today. Whether it's the abortion industry, people might ask, well, was Hitler possessed, or those types of things. We also have to make a distinction, though, between our free will, because we all have free will. We can choose evil over good. We're not just all victims of demons that are havocing our lives. Evil is a reality, but there also is personal responsibility in the choices that we make. Think of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. When they sinned and God went to Adam, what did Adam say? Eve did it. Eve, what did you do? Serpent did it. Always blaming. And I always wonder, whenever I hear that story, is what would have happened to human history if when God went to Adam, Adam said, I sinned and I'm sorry. If he just took ownership rather than blaming. And ultimately, that's all we have to do in life, is take ownership. Because even the notion of reconciliation, when we confess our sins, we place them in the hands of God. And once we place them in the hands of God, then the devil can't use them against us. Too many people carry so much guilt around with them. We can't change the past, but we can change the future and where we're headed just by making some better choices in our lives. There's a great sign. I like to read church signs. Catholics were not good at putting them out. My diocese is only 9% Catholic, so it's a Catholic population is very small. But the other neighboring churches always put them out. There's a great one that says, every saint has a past, but every sinner has a future. So saints were not perfect people. They just came to terms with their own brokenness and know that they needed to invite God more deeply in. Sinners, which is all of us, we just need to do the same thing.
You said during the exorcism you rely on some different types of prayers, and I wanted to know if there are prayers that are more effective or that you rely on more versus like the Hail Mary or the Our Father.
The prayers that I rely on can be different for every exorcism because the demons vary. So I will always watch and observe what seems to elicit a greater response from the evil. And then I will use that prayer more and more. So my dad's 85, so we left him at the record. He's watching TV. Unless he went to Dairy Queen, it didn't help.
I'll go to Dairy Queen. Thank you for being here tonight, Father. You had referenced earlier tonight that at one time there were 12 exorcists in the United States, and now there's 50.
Yes.
Is that correct? So what that would lead me to believe is that there's a growing number of exorcisms that need to be done, and maybe hence there's a growing amount of evil in the United States. I'd like you to comment a little bit on that.
Yes. So that's a good question. Do I think that there's more evil present in the world today? And my response to that always is, I don't believe that the devil is up to his game, but I think that more people are willing to play his game. And I think more people are willing to play his game because, you listen about the Year of Faith, the new evangelization. So many people have just become indifferent to our Christian faith. So Christianity built the Western world, but the Western world now is kind of turning its back on Christianity. And I think a lot of people are just bored with it. So there's a lot of people that look at ties to the occult and they think that that's more fun, exciting, it's entertaining. So people are drawn to that. I think about 40 years ago, this is my guess, I'm 49 by the way, I turned 49, 95 next year, so I'll be 50 next year, but 40 years ago, people said they no longer believed in the devil. What do people say today? They no longer believe in God. The auxiliary bishop in Indianapolis, we just had a new archbishop named last Thursday, so he'll be coming to our diocese December the 3rd. I think the new bishop for the Diocese of Lincoln is coming on November the 20th. But the auxiliary bishop, he shared a comment recently that always stuck with me. But he was talking to a group of priests, and he said that in the 1960s, 82% of the French people professed to be Catholic. Today, 52% of the French people profess to be Catholic. And of that 52% that say they're Catholic, 18% say they don't believe in God. 52% of the people who say they're Catholic, 18% of that number says they no longer believe in God. So for them, to be a Catholic has just become an ethnic identity or something. But it doesn't have to do with a relationship with God, a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think that's what we have to rediscover, because since we've lost that, I think that's why you see so much discussion about evil and exorcism and whatnot. Once again, if we can just reconnect with God in our lives, we don't have to worry about any of this stuff.
You talked about the demon like Leviathan, and I think that's a name all of us have like heard of before from either the Bible or movies. So can you share with us some like weirder names?
Weirder names?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they're weird or not. Names like Baal, you would hear that, so you know that. Beelzebul. There's a book out. Not the person who put it out, I wouldn't put a lot of credence in it, but somebody has compiled a book. It's about this thick, an inch and a half thick, that it has names of all these demons in there. Like the demon Abaddon is mentioned. So there are other names that are thrown out all the time. But the names that we know are only the ones that come to us through Scripture. I think I shared with the group before I left Rome, I had asked the priest, what's the most difficult, this is Father Carmine, what's the most difficult case of demonic possession you've ever dealt with? And he told me he had worked with a person for 5 years. Made progress, no progress. Once again, remember there's always more than one that seems to be present. And finally, he says to the demon, "Is your name Lucifer? Is your name Lucifer?" And the demon responded, "I used to be known by that name, but no longer." And then that's when Father Carmine said he thought that to be very profound, because the devil cannot use the name Lucifer anymore. Because to use the name Lucifer would be to identify and recognize the one who gave the name. And since the devil has completely rejected God, he could no longer use the name Lucifer, because that would be to show some type of acknowledgement of God.
Father, is there one specific demon that may be superior to all other demons, that takes a lot more prayer for that demon to leave that the body?
Yeah, the devil, Satan. I have not encountered him in my ministry, so thanks be to God. When you think of, final thought here, you think of the devil, what number do you think of? 666. What's significant about the number? On the sixth day of creation, God created humans and animals. What distinguishes humans from animals? God gave us the seventh day, the day that we can honor and glorify Him. When we choose to live for the seventh day, the Sabbath day, to honor and glorify God, we have nothing to fear. When we reject God, we're no different from the other animals. Why is it when people are possessed, their manifestations are always animalistic, growling, snarling, like a wild dog on a chain that, you're 6 feet away and it's got a 5-foot chain and it's jumping up right at you. So, and why is the number repeated 3 times? The devil wants to be like God in every way, shape, and form. God is the Trinity of persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, so the devil thinks he can get his own form of the Trinity.
I know that we didn't get to everybody's questions, but I do really want to be respectful of Father's time and his schedule. Father's very busy. He's got a large parish. It's very great of you to take the time to come out here again this year. We're very grateful. Thank you, Father, for such a great presentation.